Welcome, everyone, to a wonderful event as part of Reconciliation Week. My name is Kon Karapanagiotidis. I am going to be your moderator today of this incredible conversation with some of our nation's most incredible leaders. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri, Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung land of the Eastern Kulin Nations. I want to pay my respects to elders, both past and present, and to all First Peoples that are joining us today across this great nation of ours. You're most welcome to put into the chat which country land you're on as well. And I would invite you as well, because as part of this 1 hour gathering today, there'll be the opportunity for a Q&A. So if there are questions that you would like to ask of the panelists, this is your amazing opportunity to put them into the chat. Let's start by talking about Children's Ground. I've been a volunteer on its board for more than 14 years. And what drew me to Children's Ground was something that is extraordinary and unique about it. At a time where the headlines are telling us that change and progress isn't happening for First Peoples, that the gap is not closing, in Children's Ground, on the ground, we are seeing remarkable generational change. Children's Ground is unique in that it is First Nations controlled and First Nations led. It focuses on a generational approach from birth to adulthood, with the understanding and belief that if you equip children and young people with their language, their culture, their community, connect them back to land, wrap around culturally driven healthcare, knowledge of country, connection to land, employment opportunities, and a voice at the center of all that Children's Ground does, that communities will thrive. We've worked with more than 1,500 people in the last year, the vast majority of them being families and children, through engagement in education, health promotion and education, connection back to country, employing dozens and dozens of First Nations people, and providing that critical pathway to agency and self-determination. This week is Reconciliation Week, and as part of it is our Wear It Yellow campaign, which is an amazing campaign where you're supporting systemic change, First Nations-led, grounded in the idea that the way in which true reconciliation is achieved is through truth, is through voice, and through treaty. And at the heart of it, self-determination. It is my honor to begin by introducing you to our incredible panelists, who are just extraordinary people. First, William Tilmouth is an Arrernte leader from Central Australia and the founding chair and now co-chair of Children's Ground. As the founding chair, William has played a central role in establishing a model grounded in culture, elders, and community voice. In December of last year, William deservedly was given the prestigious Human Rights Medal, the award recognizing decades of leadership, grounded in lived experience, cultural authority, and a deep commitment to the rights, dignity, voices, self-determination, and futures of children, families, and community. William has spent decades advocating for leadership and self-determination of First Nations people and community. Second, I'd love to introduce you to Jane Vanderveloo, who is the CEO of Children's Ground. In 2000, along with the Arrernte elders in Central Australia, she co-founded Akalelura, one of the first organizations based on First Nations knowledge systems in traditional healing and well-being. She has worked with William Tilmouth for 15 years, culminating in the foundation and direction of Children's Ground, of which Jane is the founding CEO. Children's Ground was created with a 25-year approach to ensure future generations of children are afforded equity, access, and justice to determine their future. Jane is just an incredible leader and an honor to work with. Shortly, and apologies for technical difficulties, will be our co-chair, the extraordinary Evelyn. Schaber is an Arrernte woman and senior First Nations leader with extensive experience across governance, education, and community-led organizations. Evelyn is co-chair of Children's Ground, recognizing the dual and equal roles of men and women in First Nations governance. Evelyn has worked alongside First Nations communities for more than 50 years across education, community development, systems reform, and social justice. The organization is led by people who understand that by equipping and centering First Nations knowledge and expertise and connection to country and culture, this is how you create real change. And our final incredible panelist is Travis Lovett. Travis is a Kerrupmara Gunditjmara man, former Yoorrook Justice Deputy Chair and Commissioner. Travis is also the leader of the Walk for Truth, which has brought thousands upon thousands of people together in support of a national truth-telling process. Travis has spent his life advocating for truth and justice for First Peoples. He's passionate about practicing in culture, working with community, and preserving Aboriginal languages. Travis has played a key role in supporting Victoria to progress and proudly be the first state to implement treaty. And it was my honour yesterday to see the final part of Travis's walk, 904 kilometres or 6 kilometres from Melbourne to Canberra, to be met by the Prime Minister on the steps of Parliament House. Just extraordinary leadership. I wanted to start with a huge round of applause for Travis for just the extraordinary leadership in bringing together tens of thousands of Australians to drive a truth-telling process as the start of the foundation if we're going to have true reconciliation. Travis, I want to start with the first question for you. You've just completed this incredible National Walk for Truth. And it's an amazing example of people being all in about being community-owned, controlled, and led. Can you tell us about the experience and touch on the role of community, philanthropy, business in amplifying and supporting this call for national truth-telling? Because I'll never forget yesterday, you're talking about this is something owned by the whole community, and that the whole community needs to own this and help drive and lead this. Over to you, Travis.
Yeah, great. And thanks very much, brother. And I acknowledge that I'm on the lands of Ngunnawal and Ngambri mob, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and future, and recognise the other esteemed panellists here, Uncle William, then Jane. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to be here and really support. So I'm wearing yellow. I'm representing proudly, and I walk many days on the walk wearing the colours as well. Really passionate about the work, which is also why I wanted to spend some time here today. But what just first, and also as well, like whilst myself and Renata walked the whole way, but we were able to walk with thousands of people. So I also want to give a shout out to the thousands and thousands of people who joined us on the National Walk for Truth. Truth telling is long overdue. When our mob speak, it's always the truth is the foundation. We've spoken truth for more than 230 years, as in since colonisation. I mean, we've always spoken truth in our lives, but the point about colonisation, and it's we're, I guess, expecting government to play catch up and actually, deliver on the commitments that we've made, but also the strong voices that have contributed to all the movements that we're able to, not only, I guess this is not the first walk, and I'm hoping it's, I hope it's, the last walk, but we know with the relationship we have with government, there'll be more walks to do, unfortunately. But yeah, just a big shout out to everyone. But we wanted to walk, I guess, to bring thousands of people together. Since the failed voice referendum, that the Prime Minister had promised that he'd deliver Uluru Statement from the heart in full, and we are yet to see. Whilst the voice, as I said, failed, but we, as Australians, we get ourselves up and we dust ourselves off and we carry on, just like our old people have continually done and do. And I think that that's a really important point. But for the Prime Minister to deliver on the commitments that he'd already made, all Australians, not just First Peoples, truth telling is the way forward. It's truth telling is the key to reconciliation. We can't have reconciliation in these lands and these waters now called Australia without truth telling. We've got to get to the foundation of what happened, why it happened, the decision makers who are ultimately well aware of the decisions that they were making. But we also want to re-emphasise that it's not about everyday Australians apologising to First Peoples. It's the institutional accountability that all the work of Children's Ground and many other organisations in the plight for justice advocate for. We need that systemic change, but we need those institutions to understand that harm that they've caused. So being able to think about also how do we lift people into a space, because we've been in this vortex since the referendum, particularly many allies going, how do I get involved? How do I activate? I don't know what to do now. I guess that was one of the culminations of why we wanted to walk and bringing, Aboriginal people walking every day. Sorry, I do jump around a lot and I've got a lot to say. I always say, you mob, never give a Gunditjmara person a mic because we love a yarn. But at the same time, How do we activate? How do we bring people together? And then you just think about it. You go back to the foundations of our culture. What have we always done? We've walked country. We've had yarns. We've listened deeply. We've learned from our elders. We've learned from one another. And you think about some of the social media things that we've been saying. It all comes back to our culture, our ways of knowing, being, and doing, and actually walking side by side, literally step by step, but on the same ground together. Rather than people be elevated in institutions and so forth, and we're trying to get to them. It's we're walking together and talking and sharing culture. But also, we say we want everyone to be proud to have the oldest continuous living culture in the world as ours. But you can't have the culture without the lived experience. And it's a really important point. It's not one or the other. And I think, so that's the powerful thing. But we wanted to also go through a reclamation process around carrying message sticks between mobs and so forth as well to highlight that culture is still alive and strong in Australia. Yes, colonisation has detrimentally impacted our mob, but our mob get up every day and we're contributing. You heard through the introductions from the other panel members about, getting up and just making things happen, because any progress in this country around First Peoples, it's been led by us, and it's been a grind. Sorry, yeah.
Travis, within that, it's a beautiful summary of it. You spoke so beautifully yesterday about the importance of allyship.
Yeah.
At a time where there's this push where people are trying to be, this nation is at risk of lurching further to the right, and you're talking about moving further to compassion, to community, to be a good neighbor, to welcome. Can you talk about the power and importance of allyship and how First Peoples welcome and want that, contrary to maybe what they're hearing in broader mainstream media?
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, that's our culture. That's our culture, our customs and traditions. We've always called for healing. Every single person in this panel would have used healing many times in their life, because that's the first thing that we say. Yes, we want justice. Yes, we want accountability. But the first thing we always express is, we want to heal and move forward, and it needs to be together. We have been the most welcoming people in the world, I would say. Whilst we've been through a lot of fight, struggle, and resistance, but we are continually welcome people in, and we can't do this. We are a small percent of the population. I think that's one of the challenges that many people don't understand with the likes of voting in the referendum. We are only 3% of the population, and everyone else gets to say on what we really wanted was to be able to make decisions that affect our lives. So it's incredibly important that, yes, we had more than 6.5 million supporters and allies, I guess, through that referendum process, but also how do we continually get them motivated? And this is where we need them to talk to their friends, their family, and their colleagues based on facts, not about, many people think that First Peoples or mob get everything. It's just not true. It's absolutely not true. And we've had to fight really hard for anything that we've gotten. We know the brunt of policy and legislation when it negatively impacts our lives within like 12 hours of the legislation changing. But then when we gain rights like native title and other, progress around, children's rights and so forth, or negative rights in a sense around where it gets taken away, we feel the brunt of that. But then when we get our rights, it takes 10, 12, 15 years through native title for the government to understand what it actually is to enable those rights to be realised as well. So, but we can't do it by ourselves. We keep extending that olive branch out, or the gum leaf branch, or which, depending on which part of mob you talk about, which leaves are important to you, but you get the sentiment I'm trying to express there. We need everybody, and we want to work with everyone, and we'll continue to call to walk with everyone, and that's why we wanted to walk with everyone. As I said, First Peoples are doing it every day, but we need people to use facts and evidence rather than fear, because there is a lot of fear. We signed a treaty in Victoria, which I'm absolutely proud of, in November 19, 2025. And you know what? Nobody lost their backyard. They didn't even have to give an acre up or a hectare or anything like that. The world didn't cave in. I think, that's a really important point that we need to emphasize. We are homeless on our own lands, and this misconception that we get free houses and we get travel here, there, and everywhere, it's just not true. So again, empowering people with facts and evidence for them to be able to have conversations with their friends and their families. And we don't all get along, but one thing we need to emphasize as well is that First Peoples stand beside any injustice happening in the world. We are always the first ones there to stand in solidarity. And sometimes we don't agree on either side in a sense, and that's okay. But wherever there's injustice, you'll see mobs standing there. And I think that's what the kind of compassion and leadership that we also want to see from non-Aboriginal people in our advocacy and our rights. We don't talk for anyone else around their struggle, and we need to be able to talk for our rights and our struggle and so forth as well. But we need people to stand not in front of us and not behind us, but beside us. And that's what true allyship is. Not just during Reconciliation Week, being all in. We're all in all year round together. That's
Beautiful.
what the walk was about. That's
Thank
what
you, Travis. Thank you. And my experience over 25 years of running a refugee charity is the first community that will always show up in support of refugees are First Nations people. And for those that are joining us today that are part of a philanthropic foundation or a corporate, you've got a powerful and important role to play as well, because this needs to be a whole of community response. Beautifully said, Travis. Evelyn and William, you've both spent decades working alongside First Nations communities and advocating for self-determination. We're seeing more workplaces and organisations taking part in reconciliation activities and making public commitments. It's a two-parter here. Do you think it's making a difference? And more importantly as well, what more would you like to be seeing from people, from workplaces that are supporting reconciliation? Because as Travis said, it can't just be a once-a-year thing. It needs to be an ongoing daily commitment. Over to you. Evelyn, maybe I'll go with you first. Evelyn, you're just on mute. Apologies.
Hi, Con. Hi, everyone on the panel. I concur with what Travis has just said. We need to actually know, we need to understand the truth of what's actually happening. We need to be aware of there's so many misconceptions that are constantly, misconceptions and fear that are constantly tossed around in regards to Indigenous peoples in this country. And it is about understanding what the truth is. We're not taking away people's backyards, etc. All we're asking is for people to walk with us, understand what our fight is, understand where we're moving towards, what we've actually lost. All of the policies that have come before us have actually diminished our rights and responsibilities, and we're actually we're still trying to work on those to actually improve people's lives. We are still suffering from those policies in regards. I mean, the stolen generation, for instance. Just because people are giving reparations and etc. around the country, although Queensland still hasn't got their reparations, it doesn't stop the hurt. It doesn't stop the grief. It doesn't stop the trauma and the intergenerational trauma that goes with that. And I said hello to my sister, Jo Wilmot, who's on the board as well this week, saying is that, I know how you feel. I feel with all the stolen generations this week is that it brings it all up to the surface again. But yeah, I'll hand it over to Willie now.
I totally agree with both of you in the sense that there is a lot of myth out there. There's a lot of false accusations, false beliefs about our people. It's a way of building the foundation to justify the wrongdoings that they do to us. The truth-telling will undo that. This is what they're scared of, is that the truth-telling will bring about a clear perception on what their attitudes are. And sadly, there's a lot of people who are in the positions of power who perpetuate the myths in order to sustain what they do and why they do it and how they do it and justify their existence. They don't look at the reality that Aboriginal people are responsible people. Aboriginal people do have a sense of justice and do love their children and do want to take opportunities that are provided. They do want to live in houses that are looked after and maintained. But given the lack of opportunity, given the lack of agency in their lives, they do suffer the end part of neglect, and we get blamed for that. And it's not our fault. It's the fault of a system that totally disregards and ignores our position and our places. But on the other hand, too, I do agree with Travis in regards there are a lot of good people out there. There is an extreme amount of goodwill out there. There's people, the everyday Australian, who can see this and say, you should be given a fair go. We also have the, mainly in politics, I think, is the people who want to preserve the status quo, but they're the ones that are very hard to convince that things need to change. And Aboriginal people do have a voice, and we will speak out, and we will speak up, and we'll speak loud. But at the end of the day, if the people in power and position and privilege are going to be biased against us, then forever and a day we will have our work cut out, and reconciliation will only happen at the level that people want it to, not at the level that we should be working at, and that's the structural level, that's the system levels that allow us to have agency in our lives, to fulfil what we want to do in regards to reconciliation and self-determination. Let's not just have pretty words and say things like that, but I think truth-telling is the key to opening that foundation that they work from that perpetuates our suffering. And I think we need to use that key a lot more.
Beautifully said, William. Jane, as CEO of Children's Ground, you're often up there in places like Alice hosting people that support the work of Children's Ground, that support Wear It Yellow, that are keen to come and walk the talk. What difference do you see it making to the aspirations and work of Children's Ground?
You're on mute, Jane.
Thank you, Con. I want to recognise Travis and William and Evelyn, and thank you for your incredible leadership and all First Peoples who are joining us. It's a real honour to be on this panel, and for me, for everybody that is on here to sort of really just stop for a moment and just imagine the history and the knowledge and the expertise that is sitting with us today. And that's what really I'm quite overwhelmed with every day. And it's not just William, it's not just Evelyn, it's not just Travis. When I travel up into Central Australia, and my privilege of walking alongside and being taught by a lot of our elders who have passed away, the generosity of spirit, the wisdom, the knowledge, we are gifted every day from the voices of First Peoples. And for me as a non-First Nations person, my responsibility is to listen to that, because those voices have been around for a very long time. They hold the solutions. And for all of our funders and partners who come up, for those who are online, for those who are wearing it yellow for Children's Ground, and I'm really grateful to all of you who are doing that. It is incredibly important and very meaningful. What you do is you back that voice in. Our First Nations elders, William, Evelyn, and I don't know Travis's as much, but his life is extraordinary. What Travis is leading in terms of truth-telling for this nation is fundamental to our future. And every single person that comes, visits, connects in a legitimate way, in a real way, and listens to the voice and the solutions of First People are instrumental in this journey. So it's the thing that I love the most, is when people connect at that real level. It's not just sitting on the side. It's not just a performative action like you're saying, Travis. It's not just about what happens in Reconciliation Week. It's about what happens every day. And there's so much that's given back to all of us as non-First Nations people through that journey. I'm not going to talk a lot more in this webinar. One of the reasons I jumped in was because we weren't sure how Evelyn was going, but certainly as a non-First Nations person, I want to thank, and the head of, I'm not the head at all. I'm the CEO, and all of our elders and community are the leaders of Children's Ground. But on behalf of everybody, I want to thank all of you who have joined us today, and all of you that walk alongside us, and all of you that do come and visit, because the big message that William and Evelyn and Travis have all said is this is about a system that is corrupt and designed to perpetuate oppression. This is not about everyday Australians. What we need is every single day Australians, every single philanthropist, every single corporate, every individual to walk alongside us to shift the political momentum from the status quo that is causing enormous harm and damage, and to listen to the solutions and voices of First Peoples. So thank you, and back to you, Con.
Thank you, Jay. Now, this is a question for all panelists, and all welcome to answer it or never answer it. All of you have spent time in Canberra in recent months at Parliament House, speaking with politicians and decision makers. At the same time, national attention has been focused on issues like the cost of living and global conflicts. Do you feel First Nations voices and priorities are being heard by government at the moment? And when you look at recent decisions, including the recent federal budget, does the response reflect what First Nations communities have been calling for? I might start, Evelyn, with yourself to kick it off, and then over to you, Travis, and then William. Evelyn, what's your reflections and thoughts around, do you see us having the political leadership and First Nations voices actually being heard in the halls of power at the moment around what community wants to see?
Well, we did recently go to Canberra. We had a joint group of us from Children's Ground, and it was very very sad that the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs or the Senator for the Northern Territory could not meet with us. I was really a part of the working with the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody way back when, and with Marcia Langton in the Underlying Issues Unit. The report which tabled Marcia's the Underlying Issues Unit, the recommendations that were put through the Richie Dick report have still not been. It's a report that's sitting on the shelf that still has not been heard by the government. We just had Mickey Dodson come out yesterday talking on ABC saying, the Bringing Them Home report, which was launched in Melbourne, where and I was at that launch as well, where the people turned their backs on John Howard. There's 6 of the 83 recommendations have been they've acted on. So each of the reports, we've just had a report done by Children's Ground. The Health Department did a review of Children's Ground, but we're still waiting on government, and their recommendations have been very favourable, but we're still waiting on the government to say, well, it's a government report that they still won't actually talk to us about. It's really hard. I think we try and do all the right things, but we are still waiting. We are still waiting on basic human rights, basic housing, as you've just heard in the, little Kumanjai little baby has brought to the fore. People are still living in overcrowded houses. People are still not having access to health. People still not having access to just general everyday things. So if the government listened to what we've already done, we'd actually be somewhere towards moving forward.
Beautifully said, Evelyn. And the research you reflect calling on is the research conducted independently by Allen and Clark Consulting, commissioned by the Australian Government's Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. And it found the Children's Ground approach makes a direct contribution to First Nations children engaging in early years culture and on-country learning, First Nations people engaging in health promotion and support, and First Nations employment, saying that it was leading practice in early intervention and place-based First Nations-led design. There are always solutions, as Evelyn's just talking about. It's about the lack of political will to invest in them. Travis, you were just in Parliament yesterday with the Prime Minister. What are your reflections and thoughts on this question?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with Auntie Evelyn anymore, to be honest. I think it's we talk about closing the gap, right? And 4 of the 19 are on track. And the challenge is that the closing the gap is built on a deficit model. It doesn't ask the question or challenge the question like our people have been doing since day one, which is, why is there a gap in the first place? And it also doesn't bring us up to par. It's a lowballing expectation from government around where, to pick up on Arne and Unk's points in the previous comments about where they think we should be. And we have high expectations of ourselves as mob. And I think that's a, I guess that's their founding principle. Also, because it's a Liberal initiative, Labor's not going to really push really hard because they're not getting any criticism. They do have the weight in numbers right now, where they have the political capital. We talk about capital gains tax, and mob don't understand that because we're struggling to get a house, let alone multiple houses and so forth as well. We're continually, that systemic racism and shut out. Again, it's that low expectations. We need leadership. We need stronger leadership. We need stronger investment into our communities. When we're on the Yoorrook Justice Commission, and we had the CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service come and give evidence. And I wanted to point this out because there was one department that the VARS, Victorian Aboriginal Health Services, VARS, sorry, I'll just use that word, VARS, had 57 funding agreements with the one department. So we're continually compounded in our reporting obligations rather than having the ability to get out and work with our community. Of course, they still do a really great job, and that's not a criticism of the org. But one department with 57 different funding agreements, and it's just, and I know that that's just one microcosm in the state, but this is right across the world. Over-reporting burdensome. A lot of time with governments, they spend a lot of their time resourcing and having bureaucrats make mob jump through many different hoops rather than having the ability to impact on the ground. So then the mob get criticised as well that, all these orgs are getting all this money, which is not the case. And it goes to your earlier point around what philanthropy, business, and all that kind of stuff. This is the importance of their involvement and investment, and even more so since The Voice. We've seen many different philanthropy make it. They're nervous, and they shouldn't be nervous. It's okay. It was a massive stumbling block in our country, but we get up and move on. If anything, we need investment in different investments in different parts. City mob still, also miss out. And we have different challenges in the city. That's not to take away from regional and remote mob either. There's different complexities associated with that. But we need more leadership. And, I was a bit disheartened to hear Arndt say that there was no time made for Children's Ground. And I'll take that offline and at the same time and not talk for these mob, but certainly put on a message to say that, hey, the important work that's happening, that, our organisations need that time and need that, that emphasis to be able to talk about the challenges, but also the great work. It's not just this deficit model. I mean, we know when we do really well, government tend to not fund those. They do pilot funding, and then we do really great with very limited resources because we look at holistic service provision rather than just transactional, come in, get what you got to get today, and then you go. We try to support families staying together, connected with culture and country, to pick up on your early introductory comments. But at the same time, government don't want to invest in that, and that's a challenge. So we need more leadership. They've got so much capital themselves, and that's what we're expecting. Why shouldn't we have stronger targets and targets in a positive way rather than a target on our back and on our front since The Voice, so to speak.
Well said, Travis. Thank you, William. Finally, to you, do you think we're seeing the political leadership that First Nations people are wanting from our political leaders, are wanting from our government?
Not really. I don't think they will ever deviate from a Western style thinking to a Aboriginal style thinking in regards to a lot of the issues. There's many issues that surround that. There's child protection, there's traditional law, there's the way people live within communities, Aboriginal governance. It all existed way before colonisation, and yet people have no regard or total disrespect for the way that traditional people still think today. I've been many times to Canberra. I've talked to many politicians. I've had rather warm welcomes, but left with very cold hands, you know, and it is something that frustrates me when you think that the copious amounts of money that is poured into the Aboriginal affairs and very little ever hits the ground. It's absorbed by administration, it's taken up by people who are more interested in their own lives and have no connection with the people that they talk for. They don't live the problems that these people live in very disadvantaged situations. My granddaughter came up to me the other day and she said to me, she said, "What do you think of this quote?" And I said, "What quote?" She said, "Well, black faces in high places are not going to save us." And to me, that resonated very strongly, that there are people who are up there for their own personal prestige and their own position, and they advocate and talk for First Nations people, but they only do it for the ones that they know and the lifestyle that they lead, not the ones who suffer the greatest disadvantage. And it's a scrambled egg situation where you've got to be careful on who you talk to and how you talk to people. Sure, they sound warm and friendly, but, you know, there are many times you walk away with a heavy heart and your head down because you don't get what people on the ground really need.
Thank you, William. It's beautifully said. One of the things over the last 14 years, Children's Ground is the only place I volunteer my time. And as the son of Greek migrants, I remember when my parents came here with nothing, being told to go back to where they came from and feeling like they didn't belong here. My mum to this day often still doesn't feel that way. And so often when I'm talking with First Nations people, talking about how they feel like they're refugees in their own country. The thing is, when you go up and meet with community, I've never received such hospitality and welcome and generosity and kindness, a pride to show you country and culture. And in all these narratives you hear in our mainstream media talking about failure and waste, on the ground in grassroots, Indigenous controlled and led and run organisations, as Children's Ground is, you see communities thriving, children thriving, generations of families together contributing and connecting back to their culture, their language. The challenge is we live in a system where government models, when I talk about funding First Nations issues, most of that money is going to systems of incarceration and imprisonment rather than to systems of self-determination. And so I want to encourage everyone that is joining us today to know that there are solutions that work, and those solutions are in the lived expertise of First Nations communities. And I can't encourage the philanthropic trusts, the corporates, the workplaces that are here online today to come and see our work firsthand. And you'll be so deeply inspired and moved by seeing the change that is happening every day, the success stories that you're rarely getting shown in our mainstream media that are happening every day when First Nations people are actually in control of their destiny and being listened to and are being connected back to their culture and language and communities. Just before my next question to panelists, again, I'm inviting people, if you've got a question you'd like to ask one or all the panelists, please drop it into the chat box. I've got one question so far, but I'd love a couple more to do the Q&A with. A question to all panelists. For people listening today who want to support First Nations voices and priorities in a meaningful way, what would you encourage people to do next? They're here, they've heard from you all. Where can people direct their time, attention, or support after this conversation? One way, of course, is support Wear It Yellow and the incredible work of Children's Ground. But what are some other tangible and practical ways? Evelyn, I might kick off with you. What are other ways you'd love to see people get involved in helping out?
Our stories are all out there. Our stories are already out there. And as Travis and William are both saying, it's about walking with us. It's about walking with us on our journey. And I mean, I concur with what you were saying, Con, when you came in as refugees or from other parts of the world. We had lots of Italians and migrants come to Alice Springs to live with us when we were growing up. And again, we were all together, but they were treated the same as us, as you were just saying. All of this. My street was made up of Italians and Aboriginal people. So we actually grew up together. We're still friends. We're aunties and uncles to their children and to their grandchildren. And it's about the stories are out there. Our histories are out there and it's written. We've got, there's so many stories in our historical archives and in the papers written back in the early 1800s that tell our true story. It's there. It's up to us and up to the people out there to actually find it and walk with us. Because we have had people with us in our struggle from the time they got here.
Beautifully said, Evelyn. Jane, as CEO of Children's Ground, I know you're often, having to be there at the coalface in working with our wonderful supporters. What are some of the practical things you'd love people that have joined us today? What more can they do outside of supporting our wonderful Wear It Yellow campaign? What else would you love to see from our supporters?
I think, there's a number of things people can do, and, it's what's within people's ability. But I think my big question is, don't be complacent. Don't think that the first thing you do is the only thing you do. That message from Travis, this is an everyday thing. This is the greatest injustice in Australia. Let's be really, really clear. The greatest injustices are happening every single day for First Nations people, and all of us, as Travis said, 3% of the population, 97% of the population is responsible for compelling change. So how do we do that? We do that politically. We do that by raising our voice. We do that by challenging racism when we see it. We do that by providing donations if you have the capacity to do it, by providing your talent, to providing your expertise, to speaking to others, to sharing the voice and uplifting the voices of First Peoples. But because those voices are everywhere, but they are so often delegitimized. And so it's absolutely critical that we create the spaces, uplift, and actively every single day be absolutely deliberate about what we're doing in this joint responsibility for justice across Australia.
Beautifully said, Jane. And I think at the heart of it is also part of being a good neighbour is actually about ensuring we kind of a welcoming and inclusive Australia. We can't, in my work, I can't be talking about welcoming refugees if First Nations people don't have justice and self-determination.
That's right. And one of those, it deeply saddens me, the challenge that we have when we, the narrative around Welcome to Country. What a great moment of generosity and beauty. And we're applauded every time that we are welcomed onto these beautiful lands from the traditional owners to share these lands that have been held for generations. And so one of the things too for people is that you will actually get much more out of this journey than anyone. And so and know that it makes a difference to children, it makes a difference to families, it makes a difference to elders. Know that every single action you take makes a real and determined difference.
And I think not getting distracted by people trying to create culture wars around Welcome to Country. Like, it is a gift, the grace to where people are welcome. They're not welcoming you to all of Australia, they're welcoming you to their traditional lands. And what a gift. And to continue to do so after the referendum. Again, I can't encourage people enough. It has been one of the greatest experiences and honours of my life to volunteer for Children's Ground and to meet community and to be welcomed. And contrary again to all the misinformation out there, you have First Nations communities who are who are so ready to welcome allies and simply don't want you to be a bystander, as Jane's talked about. Trav, what else can people do? I know,
Yeah, that's. I
you
mean,
know,
I think it's
what
all
else
been
can
summed
people do?
up. I think it's all been summed up incredibly well and articulated from Art and Jane there. I think I think something that Jane had mentioned as well is skills. We've got, a plethora of skills of people listening in, but also people's connections with their friends, their family and colleagues. And we can never underestimate the power of volunteering. There's so much power in volunteering and elevating voice and lived experiences of First Peoples as well. So, whether it be getting involved in boards or whether it be reaching out to organizations saying, hey, I've got these particular skills, how could that be of assistance? But also just that really strong notion of being mindful of not speaking for our lived experience or for our mob, because we can do that very well, but there's other ways, there's other skills. We do as organizations as well, and our communities as well. We spend a lot of money on consultants that haven't really delivered very good products for us as well. So that's another real systemic barrier that we receive, because a lot of the time when you get government funding, they've got their own preferred suppliers and so forth as well, for all the reasons I don't need to say. But yeah, just walking alongside, not speaking for, I think is probably the only other sort of the things that I want to emphasize, but strongly building on those foundations that Auntie Evelyn and Jane have already shared with you, Mob. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis. Our first question from our Q&A is for you, William. A great question about how often many traditional non-for-profit spaces are not culturally safe for First Nations people. Can you share the Children's Ground governance model, how we ensure that we have a model that is safe, empowering, and as Travis said, it's First Nations people speaking for themselves, not being spoken about?
Well, fundamentally, it's a reverse of what happens now in today's world, where the government determines what they think is best for you, and as a result of that, that's what you get. I mean, the stolen generation is a classic example of we know what's best for you, and this will do you the world of good, and ultimately, at the end of the day, you will be assimilated and be able to mix in a world that will accept you. Well, that was a complete myth. I mean, it was the wrong way to do things. It destroyed families, it destroyed people, it destroyed communities, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it didn't work at all. And that's an example of where we shouldn't go. Listening to the people on the ground who suffer the greatest disadvantage, the homeless, the people who are marginalised, who don't have opportunities, listen to them. They have answers. They have solutions. Ask them, what is it that you want that make your life a lot better? How can that happen? What do you need to do that? And you can do it as a community or with the cultural guidelines in there that the right people are speaking up for the right issues. You can do that, and ultimately, 9 times out of 10, the solutions actually work. And that's what we're finding at Children's Ground is people have lived 24/7 in the problem. Surely they have an answer. Surely they have a solution. They know that's what they want, because opportunity is not there any other way. The normal way of doing things doesn't even allow you to even have a voice in there. So having agency in your life is not being dictated to. It's you determining what you want done and being assisted in doing that to achieve the outcomes that you do. I mean, really, I mean, there's one of the starting points of what people can do is to stop the cycle is to educate your children. Educate your children on the rights of other people. Educate your children on the way that other people really are, not what the myth tells you. And I think that's one of the biggest starting points in breaking down the barriers is the next generation.
William, can I just get you, that's a great summary. William, can I just get you briefly talk about our dual governance model, like the way in which we ensure. So while there are non-Indigenous people like myself and Jane that are part of Children's Ground, how all critical decisions are decided by elders, decided by First Nations people. We're there as a resource, but not there as a decision maker. Can you talk about the power of the dual governance model of Children's Ground?
Well, I mean, I used to have a debate with an elderly uncle of mine every day in the previous job that I had. And he'd say, "Good morning, boss." I said, "No, you're the boss." And he said, no, you're the boss. And I said, no, what makes me the boss? He said, "You sign the checks." I said, "Yeah, but I sign the checks because you tell me to." And we used to have this debate every day. And this is the whole thing, is that he was the boss all the time. My role is to facilitate what people need. And this is what we do at Children's Ground, is we listen to what people, their solutions, their answers, and we work towards that. And the outcomes are really starting to prove when you see young people who never ever spoke in their lives sitting up front talking strong. When young people are not Aboriginal people in general, not sticking to the back of the room, but taking their place throughout the whole front and asking the questions. And that to me is empowerment within its own self. But empowerment is something that is not instant, because history has showed us that if you spoke up, you were punished. You were treated as a troublemaker. And so a lot of people still have that learned history there that from the days of colonisation. But educate your children that there are different ways of doing things. There's different ways of looking at things.
Thank you, William. Well said. I've got. I want to take the questions of Ellie and Nicole. Thank you for those great questions and combine them. And I'd love to hear from Travis and Evelyn. They've asked, so much of the closing the gap narrative comes from a deficit model. And Ellie was talking about how much she loved hearing Travis about you talking from a strength-based model. Nicole's talking about when we're so colonized in the way in which we speak about First Nations people, how we structure our workplaces, even how we recruit. How can we decolonize the way in which we work so that we are far more inclusive of First Nations people? And how can we talk and work in ways where we're framing strengths about family belonging in ways that are actually focusing on a strength-based approach rather than the deficit model we constantly hear about? Travis and then Evelyn.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that sort of, how you've articulated that really answers the question. I think it's about empowerment. It's about looking at things, in a different way. I mean, we think about recruitment processes. A lot of time in our culture, we're not here to speak. We don't talk ourselves up about our achievements and so forth as well. And in a recruitment process for a job, what do you got to go and do? You got to go and sell yourself. Well, that's contrary to who we are and how we go about things. To pick up on Unk's point just there about the boss. I think that, that's something that's, just one sort of microcosm of thinking about HR processes, thinking about 3 people sitting on a panel or 4 or 5 sometimes interviewing one person, thinking about, just what the questions are and how you frame the questions. What are your priorities and what are you looking for in those jobs? Is it just solely focusing on, the competency of doing things, non-mob ways or white fellow mainstream ways? Or is it how much value are you putting on culture, knowledge, lived experience, and how people can connect and do things? From a systemic point of view as well, about looking at, those biases. You look at the child protection system. I mean, it's absolutely completely, racist and biased towards, taking children away and making decisions that, rather than factoring in about, kinship structures, sometimes things go wrong in families, and that's okay. Every family goes through adversity. We had evidence of people losing their children in Victoria because their children's feet were dirty. Everyone's child goes outside and plays with no shoes on, and so forth as well. So the challenge is, and you've got a lot of government departments, for instance, not just government departments, but in bureaucracies or institutions, this is how we've always done it. Well, we need people to challenge that all-in notion of every single day and actually go about asking and go, well, why have we always done it this way? How do we factor in our, First Peoples law and cultural authority into the decision making, to pick up on your point to just before as well, around different models of governance and thinking about how do we prioritize. Yes, we still need to make sure that there's, I guess, things to adhere to, but we're so risk adverse, rather than, because it's purely based on that fear mongering and fear and so forth as well, rather than actually where's the opportunity. A lot of time in the bureaucracy where bureaucrats will brief ministers, it's always risk, rather than, yeah, there's risk in every decision you make as a minister, but actually here's the opportunity, or here's the mitigating factors around how we're going to, this is the risk, but this is how we're going to work that through. A lot of time people don't want to, push the boundaries and so forth. And that's what we're asking people to do. Challenge the status quo every single day and go, why do we do it this way? And how do we move forward together? A lot of the time, there's an inflated notion of risk because people don't want to lose their jobs. They're worried themselves about their own tenure, where it's like, oh, if I challenge the status quo, I'm going to be sidelined. And, and that is a factor, but it shouldn't be the driving factor as to why you're there. If you go in there with full heart, full mind about wanting to create change and transformation, that's what we need. That's what takes systemic change, is actually pushing those boundaries. So I'll keep going.
Well said. I could
listen
to you all day, Travis. I've only got a couple of minutes left to wrap up. I just want to give Evelyn the final word before I do a 1 minute wrap up. Evelyn, your reflections, just in one, apologies, only just 1 minute, around what other positive ways can we shift this sort of colonized, oppressive model to one that's actually inclusive of all of us.
Thank you, Con. I just concur with what Travis has said and what William has said. We need to actually change the narrative, Con. We need to actually find out the stories, find out the real reasons behind everything, and make sure that we've got all of the information and change the narrative. That's what that's my closing words.
Beautifully said, Evelyn. I want to ask you to please join me in saying a huge thank you to Evelyn, to William, to Travis, and to Jane, our incredible panelists today as part of our Reconciliation Week event. Thank you all. You're remarkable. I'd like to encourage you all. I'm going to say it as a board member, please donate to the work of Children's Ground, an organisation of incredible governance, integrity, but most importantly, Indigenous controlled and led, with a real impact on the ground, succeeding. We've got our Wear It Yellow campaign until the 3rd of June. We've got wonderful donors that will match donations up to $100,000. So far, our wonderful collective donors have donated $40,000, making $80,000 of impact for the young people we support. But till the 3rd of June, your donation will match up to $100,000. There's a QR code that Anna's just put up there. And if you scan that code, you can get more information about Wear Yellow or make a donation. I also saw a question from Nick around some educational resources on First Nations issues for Victoria. Our team will follow up with you and get you some links on that. But I encourage you to please get behind the work of Children's Ground. And thank you for not being a bystander and for being part of the conversation. You've heard from the experts around the way forward. Let's gather together. Let's amplify First Nations voices. Let's be good allies. Let's donate our time, energy, expertise in any way we can. Donate if we're able to, but most importantly, not be silent. By being good neighbours and coming together, we can create an Australia where we can all be proud of. And at the heart of that, we need truth, voice, and treaty for this country to be on just terms with First Nations people and being part of the oldest continuing living culture on earth. Thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of Children's Ground, we're so grateful for all of your incredible support and generosity, and continue to walk the journey with us. Continue to come up and see the work firsthand. We're making an incredible impact. There is a story of success and generational change. Everything can change in a generation, and it's happening right now. Thank you again for joining us. Go well, everyone, and thank you again to all our panelists and to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Con.